Honesty. Let's talk about honesty because I think it is one of the most important things you can have as a manager. Not even just of a football club, of anybody, right? Like I started this, I was just playing video games for fun. I started making tutorials about it, and all of a sudden I ended up in charge of like 6 or 7 people. Right, I ended up handling 6 or 7 people's emotions, paychecks, not entirely, obviously, but having to deal with how all of that worked just because I liked doing what I was doing and wanted to kind of expand it even more. And so in my limited experience in managing people as well, being honest is probably the most important thing about expectations, right? About what you expect from somebody else and what they expect from you, right? And being honest about situations. Right? What is happening and what is reasonable to expect out of that situation. You can negotiate that, obviously, right? Like what is a reasonable expectation now that we're in this situation? You can have that conversation. But I am dumbfounded, right, by reports that have come out of Spain because we're talking about Barcelona again. And I would love to praise Barcelona. I just got done praising Laporta for chasing Xavi around, right? Even though I thought that the idea that they would let Xavi try to walk and then find out they couldn't get a better manager and trying to keep them was kind of dumb. But Laporta was honest. He was very public and said, we want Xavi to come back. And I don't want to say bullied him into coming back, but he definitely schmoozed him into coming back. He romanced Xavi Hernandez to come back as the head coach of Barcelona. But now there is tension in there again. We are in the silly season. Managers are all over the place, and that seems to be basically everything that I feel like I want to talk about right now, are all these different aspects of the silly season. And this might just be the silliest thing. It actually almost makes me mad how little sense it makes, because it points out, if it is true, I want to be clear, because Spanish media is a complex beast, and it is entirely possible that these stories are not true, right? So I don't want this to come off as a giant, this is definitely true and this guy sucks, right? But if it is true, catastrophic stupidity, dangerous, damaging, hubris, ego, stupidity. I mean, we're talking about, this is Icarus flying too close to this is Icarus trying to fly right through the sun because he thinks it's a lamp. It doesn't even make sense, right? It's so stupid. Well, here's what happened, right? Because obviously Xavi agreed to come back. If you're an avid watcher of this channel or if you just pay attention to stuff, Xavi agreed to come back to Barcelona after a spell of success and a bunch of nice wine and nice dinners. And honestly, if you gave me a bunch of nice wine and nice Iberico ham in Spain, I'd probably agree to basically anything once you fatten me up enough. So Xavi said he'd come back and see out his contract, which ends at the end of next year. And now, 3 weeks later, I think like a month later now, it seems like that is going to be reneged, or it is at least on the table. It does. I personally don't think he's actually going to get fired because of the visceral backlash that has happened to this story. There's been a massive backlash to this story. And what came out was after Xavi made certain statements to the public. Now, Forbes wrote an article which is titled, subtly, Barcelona decides to fire manager Xavi Hernandez, reports Sport. Right, that's really just beating around the bush there. And what Xavi said was that his team would try to compete with arch nemesis Real Madrid, but that the situation at his club is difficult economically and nothing similar to what used to happen 25 years ago. The manager went on to say, I want this one and this one and this one in reference to transfer market targets. Now it doesn't work like that anymore. I understand what's happening, and that's how we're going to manage. He actually kept talking, which I appreciate managers talking about this sort of stuff so candidly. Honestly, I am siding with Xavi on this one for sure. Right now, we don't have the same conditions as the other clubs with better financial fair play. The fans should know, but this doesn't mean that we won't try to achieve our goals. This is, without a doubt, the most sense anybody from Barcelona has made talking about its financial situation in public in years. This is the truth. This is unequivocally the truth. This is factually the truth. Barcelona is underwater on FFP. It has been for a while. It is battling to it has had to convince multiple players to reduce their contracts that they already signed in order to fit underneath FFP, all while making weird signings like Robert Lewandowski to continue to try and go for it when financially that is near suicidal, right? Like they are on the edge. And when you're on the edge like that, but you're Barcelona and you still make actual oodles of money, all you got to do is chill for a couple of years. So what Xavi is saying is that even though, you want to go into every offseason as a fan of Barcelona and say, we're going to get this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy, which I never even really thought of Barcelona as quite that type of team. It's a team that develops up younger players a little more aggressively than, say, Real Madrid, who are the direct contrast that Xavi's creating here, and obviously a direct contrast that seems to have existed since the beginning of time. But this is realistic. This is like what's actually happening. The financial fair play situation is not good. If they chill for a couple of years, it will be fine. It's not like Barcelona struggles to make money. But if they don't want to chill for a couple of years, they're probably going to have to sell off all of the rights they haven't already sold off. I mean, they've sold their media rights multiple times, which was actually really impressive because they sold their media rights once to satisfy the FFP, and then that sale fell through, which somehow doesn't affect the punishment of FFP. Then they sold the same media rights again, which then satisfied the FFP again. As far as I know, that one went through. I don't know. We've had to look into the Barcelona situation for a couple of times, and I have unfairly in the past blamed Laporta for the worst of that financial situation, which, as far as I understand it now, with like more learning, basically learning, right? Like more, educating myself more on the situation, right? By osmosis and watching random videos. He's not as responsible for the bad financial situation as I previously made it seem like he was. But he should be aware of it. And these comments by Xavi, that's the reason. That is literally the reason that Xavi is apparently on the edge of getting fired, because this amount of sense, this amount of making sense has apparently so grossly offended the bigwigs at Barcelona that they are seriously considering getting rid of, and I mean this, the best head coach they could possibly have for next season. The way that Forbes wrote it was that Laporta and the board were reportedly outraged by the comments Xavi made at a pre-match press conference on Wednesday. That's how they introduce that quote that you just heard. Which, and look, I would kind of, a little bit, understand it if Xavi just said, hey, we're gonna suck. That's not what Xavi said. All Xavi said was, we aren't really just gonna be able to sign whoever we want. We're still gonna try and compete for everything that we compete for. We're Barcelona, hell yeah, brother, hell yeah. Like, we're gonna still compete for everything. It's just gonna be a little more difficult to compete, obviously, for the next couple of years, because the facts are that economically we just don't have the resources to go after players the same way that other clubs are able to do, right? That's what he said. If he had said we're just going to suck, then fine. Yeah, you obviously don't want a coach that's just fatalist all the time, but this is also what Barcelona does. I've been saying this for like a year and a half. If Barcelona just doesn't sign anybody for like a year, maybe two, financially, they're going to be all right. You'll be able to pay off your debts. You'll be able to get that FFP back up to where it's supposed to be. And guess what? You got the best youth academy in the world, because there's something weird in the water. You're on like the Fountain of Youth or something. You're taking 25-year-olds and all of a sudden it's Lamine Yamal, right? They've got guys popping out of the ground all over the place that are going to be very, very good, right? They're popping up everywhere, right? And they just seem to always spawn in more. It's like they've got some sort of infinity stone. They've got the Sorcerer's Stone from episode 1 of Harry Potter. They're just bringing back like, can we have a Pele? Boom! Like it just happens, right? And they just lean into that for a year. Because you know where that amazing Barcelona team came from? Under Pep Guardiola, like that amazing Barcelona team. With Xavi and Iniesta. Xavi was a part of this. Puyol at the back of that team, right? You had Busquets involved. You had Messi. Like those guys, that was the product of a situation like this. Barcelona had what was described as a down year, right? And a bunch of younger players ended up getting playing time. And then all of a sudden, Spain's winning a Euros, a World Cup, a Euros, and Barcelona's like the best team anybody's ever seen, right? I'm not saying that's going to happen every time. The same thing happened for Manchester United. They eased in with that class of 92, right? And honestly, I think similar things happening with Arsenal right now, where they've had the same young core for a few years kind of developing up, and I think they're going to be very hard for Manchester City to handle next season, but that's for a future video. But evidence suggests if you really believe and invest in your youth academy and you give a few of those guys opportunities, especially when it's freaking La Masia, right? You can build great teams that way. So this is not fatalism. This is not admitting defeat. This is insanity that you would believe that these statements are bad. If you're Barcelona, if I'm Laporta, I know I've got to get elected, right? Because you're the president of the club. But get elected by saying, we've got great young players. I love Catalonia. And that's like, would that not win the election? You know, like, we're going to bring these guys through and Lamine Yamal's the future and he's never leaving forever and ever and ever. Like, any sort of that ringing a bell? No, let's get mad at Xavi for speaking the truth, for doing what I believe he's supposed to do. He's also managing expectations for the fans. This is the first time, clearly, because apparently they're so outraged behind the scenes, right? Angry Joan Laporta tipped to fire Xavi as Barcelona coach for 2 reasons. Give you a guess what those reasons are. Well, actually, you won't be able to guess what the second reason is, because the first reason is the comments. The second reason is Laporta is also said to be unhappy with Xavi because he feels the club have gone to extraordinary lengths to make signings and the coach has not benefited from it. Oh. I mean, that sentence in itself, and it's an admission that Xavi is right. That is. It's an admission he's right. He feels the club's gone to extraordinary lengths to make signings. Well, why do you feel like you have to go to extraordinary lengths? Because you're fucking broke. Right? And that's fine. You won't be broke in 2 years because you make like $8 billion a year. That's not true. But they make a ton of money a year. You just sat on your hands for a year or two, you'd be fine. You wouldn't be broke anymore. But it does not matter how much money you make. If you always spend more than you make, then you'll always be broke. Right? I didn't expect to be dropping like huge finance bars on you today. But if you always spend more money than you're making, you will always be broke no matter how much money you're making. And he's admitting that they went to extraordinary lengths to make signings and then saying, Xavi really hasn't utilized them. Wasn't that the same case freaking 3 weeks ago? When you were on your hands and knees begging for Xavi to come back. Right? And of course, because of the Spanish media, and I mean, basically media anywhere, there's always one scummy journalist in the corner trying to cook up a story, right? This could not be true. But if it is just unbelievably stupid. And it's boiling over, whether it's true or not, into reality. Right? The Athletic reported about chants at Barcelona's most recent game, where at halftime they were chanting Xavi sí, Laporta no, which means Xavi yes, Laporta no. So now they're turning on Laporta. You've got friggin' Xavi having to come out and defend Laporta in this situation, right? He's saying that he hasn't heard anything, and he's saying that, you know, there's tranquility being passed down to him from the top of the club, which tranquility is not a word I would have used to describe Barcelona for a long time, right? Based off the way things have been going. But he basically lashed out at the fans for chanting against Laporta. So to Xavi's credit, he is sticking with, that kind of only trust the people in the room with you. And clearly Xavi hasn't heard anything from the board of Laporta about this. But typically with a story like this, it's one disgruntled board member talking to a journalist on anonymity, and then it just kind of blows up into this whole giant thing. But at the very least, the seed of this idea is out there. And it's insane and it's causing real world problems for Xavi. And I have to believe this is the reason he wanted to step away in the first place. Because Barcelona is just so chaotic. But I think Xavi's the best person for them. He is a man of the club that has more trust because of that. And he's a good coach. He's proven that he's a good coach. Directly in the comments, he said, I understand the whole mess talking about the rumors, but I haven't been informed about being fired. The confidence hasn't changed. I think if it changes, we will inform you. I continue with maximum ambition. Absolutely nothing has changed about mine. That is him just ever so slightly walking back his comments saying that not even because the FFP is difficult, we will maintain absolute ambition. But he's towing the line. He's not actually walking his comments back. He's just kind of changing the tone ever so slightly. Deft diplomacy in the public eye from Xavi, awkward moments for Barcelona, and potentially catastrophic stupidity. We will see how it unfolds. Next on Zealandism. I like that. Should be an anchor. Sit at a desk all day. Guess I do that now. Am I an anchor?